This episode of the Old Dogs REI Network is brought to you by Mino Studio.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manacero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manacero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us gets solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, we have a great show ahead for you today. Author that we have on here is of one of my favorite books, and it really has made a significant difference in the way that I do things and have done things in the past. So I'm talking about Jay Papasan. He is a best-selling author that serves as vice president and executive editor at Keller Williams Realty International, the world's largest real estate company. He is also vice president of Keller Inc., co-owner of Keller Capital, and co-owner alongside his wife Wendy of Papasan Properties Group with Keller Williams Realty in Austin, Texas. He was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and after attending the University of Memphis, he spent several years working abroad in Paris before attending New York University's graduate writing program. Upon graduation, he found work at HarperCollins Publishers, where he helped piece together some best-selling books such as Body for Life by Bill Phillips and Go for the Goal by Mia Hamm. After moving to Austin, Jay joined Keller Williams Realty International, and in 2003, he co-authored The Millionaire Real Estate Agent alongside Gary Keller and Dave Jenks. The resounding success of the book, which focused on the systems, models, and tactics used by the nation's top real estate sales agents, brought him his first experience as an acclaimed author when the book became a national bestseller in 2004. Having landed on a formula for providing insight and easy-to-follow strategies for success, the group maintained their momentum and strung together a series of books that found their way on to the best-selling lists, including the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and New York Times. The books he helped craft have collectively sold over 8 million copies. His most recent work with Gary Keller on The One Thing has sold over 500,000 copies worldwide and garnered more than 300 appearances on national bestseller lists, including number one on the Wall Street Journal's hardcover Best Business List, and has been translated into 27 different languages. Jay was named recently by Huffington Post as one of the top 5 entrepreneurs to watch in 2017. Well, quite a background there. I am so happy to welcome Jay Papasan to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Thanks so much for having me. That was the most thorough introduction ever. Thank you. I'm blushing over here. Wow.
Well, I'm looking at it, I'm kind of going, wow, and it's probably, I don't even know if it's, everything's updated too, because sometimes, these things are, just there, and I'm looking at it, but it's so impressive and it's so amazing what you've accomplished in relatively short period of time. You're still a young guy. You're not an old dog here.
I'm getting there fast, believe me. My kids are helping that process.
Yeah, they do that. I always I look at pictures of my wedding, and my hair was dark and, and all this stuff. And then after marriage with a few kids, I'm like the white hair, just like a different guy. But anyway, yeah, I know how that happens. And, but what a
Well,
blessing
a
it
lot
is.
of it's got to do with a big part of becoming a successful, I think the number one thing for an investor, is their network. And I had the privilege of doing a lot of the stuff with really amazing people at Harper. I got to work with amazing authors. And, I've been working with Gary Keller, a self-made billionaire, since 2000. And it's just like I count my blessings every single day, because when you work with people like that, they expect you to raise your game along with them. And it's been a great journey.
Yeah, he seems like an amazing man, and I've seen some of his talks, and obviously read a lot of his books, being in real estate. And yeah, he seems like it'd be a great guy to work alongside. They're very fortunate.
Yeah, and he's not just driven. He is exactly what you said. Been a great guy, great father, great husband, great mentor. So it's been, what a privilege. So anyway, let's move past the introduction stuff, because it's making me feel very self-conscious.
Okay. Well, let's, I might, just kind of take a step back here. You didn't really start off in real estate. I mean, it looks like, you're sort of on the path to either journalism or writing, what have you. And did you kind of just sort of ease into real estate, or, were you always kind of interested in being an investor?
Not at all. Not at all. It was one of those where I always had my head in a book. So at different times, there were different evolutions. I worked in bookstores as some of my first jobs. So I wanted to be an editor. It's one of the things I did. And then when my wife and I relocated to Austin, it's kind of a long story, but that's when I kind of jumped over the fence. There was no good editing jobs here, and tried to become a professional writer. And the only reason, I've been able to develop this, real estate track record is that even though I had sold millions of books as an editor, there's no editing work here. So I got a job as a newsletter writer in Keller Williams. That was going to be my day job so that I could freelance on the side. And I happened to hook up with Gary Keller, who's, as you know, is kind of a visionary. And so I remember the first book we wrote together. We wrote it in about 90 days, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. It was just crazy productive time, where I was the writer and he was the subject matter expert with Dave Jinks. And I didn't want my name on the cover. I thought, wow, I'm going to get pigeonholed into real estate. I really had that thought. And he said, no, I'm going to put your name on the cover. You deserve it. You did a lot of the work. And that's just who he is.
That's
and
neat.
My thinking was so small. It hadn't yet been expanded. But, that book, I told him it would sell 50,000 copies. We sold twice that many the first year. And it sold over 1 million copies since we first wrote it and debuted it in 2003. And so, I would have never dreamed that would be a 1 million copy bestseller. And he forced over my objections my name to be on the cover. So, but that was the education, right? Co-authoring with them, trying to stay up to their speed and working in a real estate environment, I just found that it was infinitely more interesting than I ever imagined. And when we got to interview 120 millionaires. They had an equity valuation, not valuation from the market standpoint, but their equity in their real estate holdings was over $1 million, excluding their home. I interviewed 120 people who had accomplished that.
Wow.
It changed my life. So The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, which was our second book, was the one that gave me the mentality. I remember sitting down with my wife and going, we've got to do this.
So that was sort of your light bulb moment, right? Where you
2003 is when we were, promoting The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and I was laying down the groundwork for the 2003, 2004 is when we did the research for The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And it was a complete, to that point, I wanted to be an executive and I wanted a high salary. And in the process of studying how wealth was actually made, I realized, being an executive with a high salary is a great way to not have a high net worth, right? It's not about your income. It's about your savings and your investments. And it was just a complete mentality change about what money was and what it was good for. So that's where I would point to the origin. And I'm lucky that my wife was on board because we lived on about 60 to 70% of our income for about, I want to say 4 years, and aggressively invested the rest so that we could start our journey. And she was just on board. We made it a game.
Oh, how neat. Now you started off with a book about real estate agents, and then you followed up with a book on the investors.
Right.
Did you ever want to be an agent, or did you immediately see, oh no, I just want to be an investor, or did you want to be both?
So if you spend any time with me, you know that I would be a horrible failure as an agent. I'm an introvert. Like, I just don't ever need to go out and meet new people, which is just, I know some people who are very successful in real estate despite that, but I probably wouldn't be one of them. Investor, absolutely. I got it. I wanted to have control over my financial future. I wanted to define that future and just know that it was ours. And it suited my personality in every way. I'm a little analytical, and I can be very aggressive when I understand the risk. That fit my profile. What I'm lucky is I'm married to an extrovert, and eventually, after our children were off to school, about 7.5 years ago, she got a real estate license. And the Papasan Properties Group, that is one of the areas where you've dated. Like, she's now operating in Austin, St. Louis, and Minneapolis. And I mean, she'll sell 200 homes for worth, $60 million this year, 7 years into the business.
My goodness.
She had $1 million in income less than 5 years into it.
Wow.
So she is hopefully she's my retirement plan just by herself. But she was just co-investing with me, being a landlord. And I'm like, you're really good at this. You should think about it when you go back to work. And she was going to do it part-time and found out she loved it.
Wow.
So we kind of got both. I'm kind of the lead investor. She's definitely the lead agent.
So do you remember your first rental property that you purchased, or investment property?
Absolutely. It was a little house on Heather. We bought the worst house in the best neighborhood, which was the conventional, advice. And we bought it as a homeowner. So it's actually kind of a fun story about net worth is a big part of when we talk about the one thing, what I think is the one thing we should all be tracking. I've been doing it since about 2004. But I remember I got to sit down. I went to a class, mandatory training for a franchise company on how to read a balance sheet, which is like an asset and liability sheet for a business for one of our franchises. Well, I showed up and I was the only person there that day for the class. And the CEO at that time, Bo Anderson, went ahead and held the class with just me. So I got a one-on-one education with this legendary real estate person on assets and liabilities. And she told me to go home that night and do my own asset and liability sheet to find out what my net worth was. And at the time, we rented. We had a Toyota Tercel, which was the most valuable asset we owned. And our total net worth after school debt and cash and everything else was, I think it was negative, but our biggest asset was $2,200.
Wow.
But that was when we decided to buy a house. So our first rental property was actually our first home, but we didn't buy it like investors. So I just want to point that out for people. We just bought it like a homeowner. We thought that's definitely a path to wealth. Let's just own something instead of building someone else's wealth. And it wasn't until the Millionaire Real Estate Investor came out, I was like, wow, what will be our first investment? And Gary kind of coached me. He's like, well, y'all are about to have a kid. Y'all are going to want more space. So why don't, instead of selling your house, right, save up for another down payment? And that's exactly what we did. So our first rental property, we still own it today. We bought it for $175,000 back in 2001. It's less than 1,200 square feet. It was a 2-1. We've made it into a 2-1.5. We put another half bath in there, and still less than 1,200 square feet. That house is probably worth over $600,000 today.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it helps to be in Austin and near downtown. And while we were the worst house in the best neighborhood, the entire area is so gentrified. I mean, almost everyone just plows whatever the building is to build. So it's become one of those areas. We're absolutely the eyesore. And, we've managed to cash flow it through that entire period. And we were such scaredy cats. We had saved up almost 6 months of mortgage payments for fear that we wouldn't be able to rent it.
Wow.
So we were so cautious, and it turned out our first, was a slam dunk. And the second house we bought actually is now the shining star of our rental property. So we've done 2 moves where we turned our original home into an investment property. In our total portfolio, we own about 9 properties now.
Neat. And do you still live in that second home that you bought?
We're in the third home. You know what? honestly, we're actually in the second home temporarily because we're renovating the third home.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah,
it just so happened that our tenants gave notice right when we were going to have to move out, and we were going to buy a rental property just to live in, and we ended up buying it and renting it, but we got to live in our second home, which we already knew. So it was kind of one of those things where, great, we don't have to change our commute. It's less than a mile away. So we're actually back living in it, but just for this summer until our renovations are done.
Oh,
is that confusing enough for you?
Yeah, no, not at all. That's real convenient. It couldn't have worked out any better. In fact, that's great.
Well, we knew where all the furniture went. We're like, wow, okay, this is actually easy. We know where the couch goes. We don't have to decide.
I love it. Wow. Well, the area I love to zero in on here is really just the idea of the one thing, and
sure.
And it's always, I always look at. Yeah, this is probably a real dumb question here, but I kind of look at it when you've got like three different authors, and I'm kind of going, okay, well, where did the idea really originate from? Was it a collective thing? Was it somebody's idea in the group? Was it did it evolve? Was it called the counter to-do list, or I mean, like what where did the whole concept of the one thing develop?
So this is probably around, I'm going to say 2008. I was at that time running Keller Williams University, our in-house, kind of education arm. And I'd been working on a course, and I'd given it to Gary for review, and he wanted to take it home for the weekend. And he wanted to add a little foreword to it. He just kind of spice it up. And he's a good writer, always has been. And he came back with I'm going to say like a 7 or a 14-page essay. I don't remember how long. But I remember it was called The Power of One, and it was two real estate agents basically saying, if you can only do one thing right, get lead gen right. That's the basis of all success. It doesn't matter how good you are at servicing, clients. If you don't have clients, your service will never be seen. So it all starts with that activity. But he wrote it so cogently. I remember, I'd been in publishing at that point for 10 years working on books, and I was like, this is a book. And not only is it a book, knowing Gary and having worked with him, the thing that really separates him from competitors and other people, like his special gift, he's always been willing, to identify the priority, which takes sometimes a little thought. Like you have to stop and look at what you're doing. What's the real priority here? And he'll give it more time and attention than anyone else. And you look at our company and its growth, it's just been a series of one thing stories. Did we identify the one thing that really mattered, and did we give it our 100% effort? So on the surface, it's a really simple idea that we've been living with, and all of our systems, how we operate, was all built on these principles. So I remember we sat down and we said, this is a book. We need to write it. Everybody was excited. But because it wasn't in real estate, we spent almost 5 years working on the book before we published it in 2013. We wanted to make sure it wasn't just Gary's ideas or Jay's ideas. We went out and we did a ton of research. We had 2 full-time researchers. I had a stack of white papers that was probably 4 feet high. If you took them out of the binders, we really went deep to kind of get to the truth of how you approach things to get better results, or in the case of the book, extraordinary ones. So that was the origin story. It started with an essay, and then it turned into a very long journey to becoming a book.
Neat. Now, can you summarize, in as best you can, what exactly the concept of the one thing is, and why it's important?
Sure. I think that probably everybody listening, especially given your demographics and people who've lived a little life already, if you reflect, there's been a time where you've actually made something your ultimate priority. And things really change when you're very clear that everything on your schedule for that week revolves around X. Maybe it was a diet. I remember when I ran a marathon in '97, that was the first thing I had to plot every week, every day. When am I getting my run in? Because I knew I couldn't wait till the last minute and possibly hope to achieve something like a marathon. I had to kind of chip away at it. And, when I started to prepare for the marathon, I'd never run more than 3 miles. And in about 3.5 months, I ran a sub 4-hour marathon, all by just doing one thing every day, which is run a certain mileage according to a chart I'd ripped out of a magazine. It was very simple, but it meant that you had to identify what's the most important thing here, and it had to have right away in every area of your life. It dictated my diet, when I went to sleep, right? You understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so most of us have had a period in our life, short or long, where we have given ourselves to something that way. Maybe it's our spouse, right? We were just obsessed, right? Whatever that was, we gave it to it. And when people do that, the results are very different than the other times in our life. So the very simple principle is when we have a clarity of understanding what our priority is and then give it the time it deserves, usually something really awesome happens. So that's the big idea. We didn't claim it was anything new, but we did bring a lot of practicality. That's something that Gary and I both agree on. We don't want to just give people ideas. We want to give them an action plan. And we did kind of build some, quote, technology into the book so that people, like we have a focusing question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And by asking that simple question, in our experience, most people get really close to their answer. Then you have to time block it, and then you have to protect that time block. So we do have a process for making it happen.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that actually attracted me to the book was I kind of grew up in areas where there was always a lot of real estate activity. There were I had a lot of friends that were agents and brokers and so forth. So I knew a lot of people in this, and it was just blew my mind that I knew about Remax and I knew about some of the standard folks that have been around forever, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's this Keller Williams organization that I'd never heard of before. And then when I found out how big they were and how they eventually became the biggest, I was blown away, and I wanted to find out who this Gary Keller was and how did he do it and all this. And it's so interesting that the book really tells you a lot about how he focused to such a degree to grow this little organization out of nowhere to become what it is today. And that to me is just an amazing story. But I see the concept, that really, you look at people like Sylvester Stallone, and his whole quest to get Rocky to become a motion picture, and that's all this guy saw. He ate, breathed, and everything was this dream he had, and how it all came about. And I think we could all probably think of examples that people we know and others we've heard of that really, with that kind of focus, that pinpoint focus, how you really can accomplish amazing things. It's a great book. It's an easy read, and it very much motivated me. I still have challenges though within the book, and a part of it is, sort of narrowing down. Seems like there's like one things in various aspects of your life too,
Yeah.
So you have business, family, personal, spiritual, that, don't they kind of conflict at some point?
You're talking about page 114 in the book, and that's the only page I have memorized because I teach it all the time. And so the idea of figuring out your one thing, we were joking around. It's like, if you ask the focusing question, it should be something that's kind of significant in your life, right? Something that matters, not figuring out, what's the one Netflix show I can binge watch this weekend, such that by binge watching it, like that's ridiculous, right?
Right.
So it's for figuring out the big priority. So we attempted, just for Gary and I, to say, in the areas of your life, do you know what the priorities are? And for us, the first one was your spiritual life. If that's not in order, you may be postponing some things that you'll regret later. Your physical life came second, right? And we kind of go around that, your personal life, your key relationships, your job, your business, your finances. And we felt like a lot of people, they look at their spiritual life, their physical life, and their personal life, their hobbies, the things they do just for themselves. Like that's kind of the foundation. When those things aren't operating well, a lot of times they affect and roll over into our key relationships, and they certainly show up in your job, and over time they'll impact your finances. And so we tested the ideas, and I think everybody's order is their own, but that was what it was for us. And so the whole point of the exercise of identifying priority means first. So the idea that we have a plural of them at all is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
So the ultimate priority would be your spiritual one thing. And that should theoretically, whatever that is in your life, should kind of hold sway over the other ones. I find that if you just a little bit of planning keeps everybody from bumping into one another, and a lot of times you can dovetail them. My wife and I, our physical one thing is we work out together 3 times a week. And we do it like at a crazy time. We get up at 5:10 in the morning. But that was when we could do it and not have to leave our kids with the babysitter or alone. But we had to think about it. And that's actually become some of our best personal time together, believe it or not. We get that 3 hours of just kind of sweating and talking, and it's just time that we know is always there. And we've been doing that for like 7 years. So sometimes they line up together. We call it lining up your dominoes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can identify your priorities. I mean, ultimately, I'm at work today. I'm on deadline. If I get a call, my wife's out of town today, that my kid had to go home sick from school, what's my ultimate priority? To finish my assignment here or go home and be with my daughter?
No, go home.
Exactly. I think at different times we realize it, and a lot of times when we're violating it, we feel really guilty.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the dad that went to work instead of the soccer game,
Right.
Or is at work on a Saturday because he didn't do his job well enough during the week and therefore is missing the birthday party or there's a lot of that goes on. So the whole point of the book, if we wanted people to do one thing, it would be to ask that question. What's my one thing this year? What's my one thing this month? What's my one thing this week, today? When people can just stop and have a system for identifying their one thing, their real priority, it helps them navigate everything else around it. And the other thing, I know we only have limited time, but we do talk a little bit about forming habits. And that can really, there's a lot of talk about that in the podcast world. But if you know something's really important, like we posit, why not just make it a habit? Like brushing your teeth has added more years to our lives, dental health, than just about anything else we've done in medicine. There's pretty good consensus out there, right? Our dental health has helped us live much, much longer. And I know, because I still have fairly young kids, that's a lot of work to build that habit. Your parents have to nag you for years.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us today don't worry about that anymore. It's just automatic. Almost any behavior, we can train ourselves until it becomes automatic. So when you really understand something, whether maybe it's prayer for your spiritual life or exercising or diet for your physical life, you can identify a core activity and make it a habit. Now, obviously, you do those one at a time, not 7 at a time. But once you've established a habit that's really working for you in an area, then you can just use a little bit of energy to maintain it and then add one somewhere else. And I look at Gary as someone, my partner, when I met him, he was overweight. He wasn't particularly good at managing his stress. He was very successful at business, and he was doing very good with his wife and kids. But there were other areas that weren't. And I just watched him systematically add new layers to his life, spend a long time on them. Like I remember for years he was focused on trying to be a better musician. And now he plays in concerts every year.
Wow.
And he's excellent. He's not extraordinary. He's very hard on himself. But he put in a lot of work over a long time. And people show up and go, wow, you're in great shape and you have a great diet and you have all these things. He didn't do all that stuff at once. He just did them sequentially over time. So that's kind of this, you figure out the priority, you figure out how to incorporate it into your life, and a habit is a great way to do that. And when you've got that thing going, then you do get to go to the other stuff, because nobody has a list of one thing. I know that for a fact.
Mm-hmm.
But we do get to address other priorities in their time. So I'm kind of all over the map there, but does that make sense in your context of the book? Does that help you with that part?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the area where I saw it was under a chapter about willpower, and it talked about, the most important things you get done early.
Yes.
And, I say my Bible study, my workouts, and then you kind of get into that gray area here. If I know that if I wait too long, I've set this crazy goal, and people that listen to this know it's 1,000 units by 2020. And, I've had to stay.
That's a big question.
Yeah, very, very focused to do it. But I know that prime time when there's no phones ringing, where there's no, kids running in doing this or that or whatever, that it's just like that guarded special time. And yet I don't want to take away from God. I don't want to take away from the thing that I should be doing. I know I should be doing, but yet if I've still got that thing kind of going back and forth. Okay, yeah, but am I limiting my Bible study because I know I need to use this prime time for business too? And so those are some of the tough ones where you only have so many hours there. And I'm an early riser. I'm up at like 4 or 5 o'clock every day. So. But I do see how that can be a little bit of a challenge, just managing those so that, you do give the attention where it's due.
Yeah, you can't do everything. We know that. That's a firm fact. But you can do a handful of things really well, and you can do one thing extraordinarily. There is a guy named Tom Corley. He wrote a book called Rich Habits, which is just okay. But I like his story that he used around it. He was a CPA. And every year he would survey his clients. And one of the questions he asked was, what time do you get up? And he found that all of the high net worth individuals, the millionaires, got up on average 3 hours before they got to work. And in the context of now, like Tim Ferriss and morning rituals, like we're almost inundated with this. But I do think that when you talk to really successful people, you're going to find out that they are up before the rest of the world. We do have more willpower then, and you don't have to use as much. I mean, I'm sorry. I get up at 5:10 most mornings. There's nothing good on TV. I'm never tempted to turn on the TV, right?
That's true.
Even ESPN is in a weird place, right? Where you're just not even going to get the best, that the good show shows up around 7 a.m. my time. So there's no one's calling me. No one's texting me. The emails in my inbox are static because no one's emailing me. So you have tremendous control over those morning hours. So I do think a lot of people invest in themselves before they go to work. And then I usually tell people at work, start with your most important task. So, like you're building your wealth, 1,000 units, that's rental units by 2020.
Yeah.
I would love, what's the one thing that you have to accomplish this year to feel like you're on track for that goal?
What I do is I actually double the number of units I have each year. So I'm only in year 3, so I'm looking at 100 plus units right now. But the units I have plus the 100 plus that I buy, I have to double the following year. So it gets a little more intense as I'm looking at. It gets more intense. Yeah, like 200, 300 units, and I'm buying multi, so it's just finding that one building or complex. But still, it's not easy, and especially in today's environment, we're so competitive out there.
How hard would you beat yourself up if you got to half of your goal at 2020?
I probably pretty bad, but at the same time,
that says a lot about you. I think most people would dream of owning that many units.
Yeah, right.
That's hardly a horrible place to be. When you aim high, you fall short. You're going to go farther than most people. We almost always fall short of the mark. Gary kind of tells me he's never hit a goal. Yeah. The moment he feels like he's going to hit it, he raises it because it just determines the activities he has to do in order to be on track for it. That's the only reason you use goals.
Yeah.
What are the activities I have to live day in and day out that will make me the kind of person who will have that then? Well, great. I'm going to start living that. The moment you get on track, raise the goal. He says, I'm just a constant failure, which he says tongue in cheek, obviously. But it is, I love that you're asking that question. It's a great question. And do you know what that will do for you? Have you defined what it will do for you to have that level of ownership?
Yeah, and that's kind of actually leads into the second question I have too, because it's the interrelationship between the one thing and our why. Okay, because I have a nonprofit in Haiti. It's called Child Hope International, and I don't need the funds that would be generated by 1,000 units. There's no way I would need it, but the majority of those funds would go to the orphan kids and the street kids that we work for and work to help in Haiti. So that's my why. Okay, so it's that integrating my why with my one thing that has to work. But that's what motivates me is when I'm sitting there and I'm calling, and I talk about introvert. I'm really real hard. I go to networking events and I'm just like I find any excuse I can to not talk to somebody. It's crazy.
Or find one person and just lock onto them.
Yeah,
right?
and that's what I'll do. And somebody's trying to shove me off after about 10 minutes, going, "Okay, go meet somebody else." But yeah, I'm real bad at that. But it's like while I'm doing that or trying to motivate myself, if I can reflect on my why, if I can see that little kid that's sleeping in a doorway, in downtown Port-au-Prince, that kind of thing motivates me, and I click on that and I go, look, you can meet a few new people, Bill. It's going to make a bigger difference than you think, and that helps me get through the things that aren't so much fun to do. So.
I think that's great. I think that's the first priority. I've taught wealth building using the one thing ideas like a few times. I got to teach the real estate investment club at Google, and that was cool. But the first thing I usually tell people to do is start with your why. Why do you want to build wealth? And, we defined wealth as having the unearned income to finance your life mission without having to work. That's wealth to us. There's no dollar sign associated with it. But it means that you get to do your life mission and you don't have to have a job to support it. And, for me, that meant financial freedom. But why is that important to you? And I usually will ask people, everybody has that. Why is that important to you, right? The kids in Haiti, right? And that's obvious. What will that do for your life? Well, I feel like very fulfilled. And then the question that gets people, and this is when I know if they're being honest, is like, what will happen if you don't accomplish that goal? And if there's no consequence, if there's no, I personally, when people ask me that question, I will tear up sometimes because the cost of failure is too high. I understand not reaching your goals, but I have to be making the most progress I'm capable of to feel okay. And that's important. And that motivation, the thought for you of a child sleeping in a doorway, most of the things that big success required, they're not complicated, but they're not easy. And they can be a grind. And that why is the thing that sustains people. People who just want to be a millionaire for the sake of being a millionaire, the number one reason they don't get there, it's not because they have the wrong model. It's not because they don't know what to do. Is they don't actually have the real motivation to do those things.
That's
so I love your answer. That's the first domino. Figure out why you're on this journey, and is there a cost if you don't achieve it?
Right. No, there definitely is. At least in my eyes, there is. But like you said, I didn't make. I was 8 units behind my goal last year, and it didn't kill me. I wasn't walking around kicking myself or anything. I'm just thinking, well, I was normally going to target like 78. This time, I ramped it up to 100 plus. So I'll make up that and then some. Yeah. So
we had similar. We did similar things with our net worth. We started with a goal. When we first set out, we wanted to have $1 million in net worth and $75,000 in income in less than 10 years. And when we set down that path, we hit our net worth goal faster than we thought. And we also realized about halfway down the line that, man, it's a lot harder to get the cash flow goal than we thought. And we knew that we had to change tactics. And now, our goals now we don't double. That's just so aggressive. I love it. Ours go up by 40%, but every now and then you hit an inflection point where even though you've got all of the experience of the past 3 years that you were on that journey, making a 40 or 100% jump early is a lot easier than 4 or 5 years down the road, which you're experiencing, right?
Right.
But you know so much more, and you actually can then pivot. We started investing in business, realizing that was an opportunity, just like real estate, but to get the bigger numbers in cash flow that we thought owning businesses. And by the way, multifamily, I consider that a business. It's a real estate business, but it's a business.
Right.
So you get all those units and you're managing a business now. But anyway, I love the aggressive thinking. And I think that everybody's going to hit those inflection points where it goes hockey stick, right? Because anything that grows at a regular rate eventually turns into that hockey stick that, whoa, how did we get to this number? and you have to ask a different question. But hopefully the experience you've earned will help you get there.
Right. Good point. Really good point. Our focus of our show is really those that are 50 plus. Some are sort of in the last leg of their careers and getting ready for retirement. They're looking ahead. There are some that are already retired, maybe have been for 10 years, 20 years, and the focus is a little different. So some may be, concerned about their nest egg and maintaining it, getting the return they want. Others are looking for ways to generate more income so that they can fill the gap. And
Right.
And that's those are the people that primarily, we've targeted for this podcast. And what kind of advice would you have for them? Because a lot of them may be like me. I'm an old to-do list guy, an old school to-do list. And what advice would you give us to help us to kind of get our thinking in line of the one thing?
Sure. I think that we talk about leadership, vision being a big component of it. I think a lot of people can dream about where they want to be. But when you get really clear about what that means, like measure it in the future, then you can work backwards from it, which was a big principle in the book. Goal setting to the now. Go out to your someday goal. Where would you have to be in 5 years to feel like you're on track for that? Where would you have to be in, there's that whole process of working backwards from a goal. So I think I shared with you in the pre-interview, I have a couple of friends. I co-authored a book with them called Hold, which is about rental and properties. But
oh,
Jimmy
yes, I know that book. Yeah, I know that book. I have that book. Yeah. That's
there
great.
You go.
Okay, now I know who they are. Okay.
Steve Tater and Janice Doty were also co-authors, but I wanted to highlight the McKissicks, and they tell their story. I want to say they're in their late 40s, early 50s. She was a real estate agent, and he owned a nightclub, and the nightclub went belly up. I don't know the circumstances, but they went from having money to being hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And just like I'm sure a lot of your listeners, they're like, they didn't, everybody talks about making money in the stock market, but that's like on a 30-year timeline, right? Mm-hmm. They were like, we don't want to be working, like starting over from scratch and working for 40 years. That's too late for us. They wanted like a 10-year plan. So they defined where they wanted to be, what they thought success looked like, and then it really narrowed their choices. So I'm going to tell their story and then give people the actionable advice. So I would say go out in the future, pick a date, like by this date, how much cash flow will you need annually? Do you know the number? My wife and I, our first number was $75,000. And eventually we've raised that to 500 because it's not about us anymore. Like you, we have charities, we have foundations. So it's not so much about our personal life, it's about what we can fund with that. So when you look out, whether it's 5 years or 10 years, what's that number? How long do you have? And then how fast can what you're buying grow and what will it yield? And if you can answer those 4 questions, like I look at residential real estate, if we just look historically, it's going to appreciate through ups and downs, average out somewhere between 4 and 6%. If you want to do it on 4%, that's great. But with leverage, right, your yield on a property can be much higher. I don't know what kind of cap rates you get on your properties, but we got a warehouse here that ended up with a cap rate, between 10 and 12. We started at 10 and got it to 12. And on leveraged money, you can get a really fast return. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying not to get too technical, but I think you just go define what it is you want. You're going to learn a lot of this on the journey, but it will reduce the number of things that you can do. So Jimmy and Linda McKissick realized that the long-term plays probably weren't for them. They were too conservative to do 0 down. They knew that they had to get a steep discount. So they ended up becoming very aggressively educating themselves on the auction process. And they started buying properties to fix and rent on the auction steps. So they used a ton of their disposable income from Linda's real estate business, and then Jimmy got in too. He'd go down to the courthouse and buy properties. They were all 4-side brick. He's got a million funny stories about that. But they had to cash flow on a 15-year note. And then they would make extra payments to try to reduce that to a 10. So they were trying to get those properties to going from, how much do they cash flow with debt to then the pop that happens when you remove the debt as fast as they could. And today, there's some of the wealthiest people I knew. I know that they had their 10-year goals. I'm sure that they reached them much faster. You'll have to interview them to get the details. But I think if people will specify what they're wanting, right? You were very specific about the number of units you envision. That there's not a lot of choices for achieving that. I'm sure you're discovering that, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so, like for Wendy and I, we didn't narrow it down. We picked a net worth goal and a cash flow goal. Well, the net worth goal, we were in Austin, Texas. We happened to be here during a time of great growth. So the properties we were buying were benefiting from, even though we went through the Great Recession, we still benefited in terms of our overall valuation on the properties. We got a lot of hard lessons on cash flow. So I actually would encourage people to start with a cash flow question, because that's what we live on. And I hate to sell assets. So figure that out, give yourself a timeline, and then start asking the question, well, what investment vehicles could actually get me there? Residential real estate will surprise people. I expect a total cash return of anywhere between 18 and 25% on a single family property when I look at all of the factors that you can put into it. And the moment you get into the bigger properties, that will go down, but now you've got bigger amounts of money playing at those rates. So you can get there faster than most people think.
That's great advice. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Can I throw one more little bit of evidence out
yes,
there? I just thought of this. I had dinner with, I had beers with a fellow that our kids go to school together. He just retired, fairly young to be retiring. But he's like a veteran of PayPal. He was a part of Twitch, which is the multi-billion-dollar company. He's one of those tech guys. Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I said, I won't say his name. And I said, John, I'll make that name up. Your retirement, how much of that was tech money and how much of that was real estate money? Because he and his wife, like one of the reasons we're friends is they own a number of, small residential real estate properties, and they've been doing it for a while. And he kind of laughed. He goes, I wish it was the tech, but it's not. My real estate is completely providing for my retirement.
Wow.
And I loved hearing that. In this age, especially where everybody thinks they have to go to Silicon Valley to make it rich, the simple things can actually provide for us if we're willing to do the hard things that other people aren't.
God, that's great. Great. Thanks for adding that. I'm glad I didn't cut you out, because that's what a great story. What a great lesson. That's
from an unexpected place for me. I didn't expect the tech guy to have funded his retirement with rental properties, but he did.
Interesting. Wow. It's funny because I interview a lot of folks, and a lot of them that are in real estate investing. I find out a lot of these guys started in tech and they either cashed out or sold one of their little technology companies and then moved into real estate, and that's really where they're making the bucks. It's a lot of people. It's interesting. There's we're here in California. Got everybody up in Silicon Valley, and there's a lot of technology in Southern California too. So it's something that's a reality. A lot of people are looking, what am I going to do with this money now? I got this big cash out on this company. What am I going to do? And it seems like the smart guys are going into real estate, which is interesting.
It's a place. I mean, I never try to say it's the only place, because I know that there are people out there that could do it in the stock market. I'm not one of them. That feels like a level of knowledge that would take, nowadays an MIT education to really be competitive. But the thing that comforts me, I'm like a control freak, if I need to add value to a rental property, we can just go paint it and manicure the yard. Mm-hmm. And instantly add thousands of dollars of value to that asset. Like I own Apple stock. I can't buy enough iPhones that will actually impact that investment. Mm-hmm. So I love how democratic real estate is. It's one of the reasons I'm kind of, out here and I preach it when I get a chance, that it's something that a lot of people just dismiss as risky. I don't think it's that risky at all. I just don't think it's that common. And therefore, people they feel like something, they mistake uncommon for risky.
Right. Well, I think it's probably less risky than anything, because, if Apple folds, what are you holding? You've got a bunch of paper, a statement from E-Trade. But
there's a lot of bathrooms that have been papered with their stock auctions, right? The wallpaper.
It's true.
They can go to zero, and real estate almost never goes to zero.
You've always got something, you always have that chunk of land, right? Or that building. Yeah. And so, there is something there that has value that maybe it's down, but it always comes back. it's the smartest place to go.
Well, if you don't over leverage yourself, the only people I hear that really lose their shirts in real estate are almost always over leveraged, and they're not paying attention to the cycles.
Right.
I interviewed a guy the other day, and he's definitely bounced back, but he lost $40 million in the great real estate recession because he was in a speculative market where they were building spec homes, and he got caught with a ton of lots and nothing he could sell. And who's going to loan him the money to finish the houses in the great recession? Nobody. $40 million. Well, he went on and he built with a partner, this amazing Ethiopian. He started the first cattle exports from Ethiopia. Who knew that there are like 6 cows in Ethiopia? There are 6 cows for every cow there is in Texas. I would have never guessed that. And they never exported. And he's doing it all for charity to help orphans. Like, he knew his big why, and he's completely rebuilt his wealth. But it's just amazing. Like, if you're overextended, and this is a good business person, right? At the wrong time, that can happen. That's one of the reasons all of our books are so conservative. 20% down and then additional equity by buying it right. And it's just hard to see shifts that shift more than that.
You're right.
I could preach about this all day long.
Yeah, well, if you want to stay on, okay. Like, you're on deadline, I know, but hey, just real quick, just on yourself and your own business, what excites you about what you're working on and what you're working toward, and maybe you're reflecting on your one thing in that.
Well, it's fun watching my children grow up thinking that owning a bunch of homes is normal. I love that. They're getting to watch both parents be entrepreneurs, which is not something I grew up with. And then we have the one thing, we found a partner. My one thing is to keep working on the books and doing things like this, promoting them. And I went out and found a partner to build an online learning company for us. So Jeff Woods, if people like podcasts, to listen to this one, check out Jeff's podcast on the one thing. So we've started a whole platform to try to help people invest their time better. And that's been fun. I've been really excited to come into work and have something through his eyes and his work get to experience a whole new business. So that's been the big thing this year for sure.
That's neat. Yeah, isn't it funny how once we have kids, a lot of those priorities change and a lot of the focus, and that's also one of the one things, I guess you could say, that motivates me too, because I've got 7 kids. I got 3 unmarried daughters still, and
Did you say 7?
Yeah, I got 7.
Man, you're all about quantity, like a bajillion units, like 7 kids. You're crazy.
I need all the units for my kids and grandkids. Actually, they're all going to probably just move into my building.
There we go.
But no, it's it's like the thing I think of is if one of my daughters comes to me with the wedding of her dreams, for example, and we've been missionaries for the last 12 years, so we're used to living just by faith and really living frugally and so forth, but I'd be so sad if one of them came to me and they really just wanted to have a nice wedding and I couldn't do it, and I have to say, well, why don't you just go down on the beach and you put flowers in your hair and we'll just hope no one chases us off and we'll have the wedding there. But no, I'd love to be able to to give that daughter the wedding of her dreams, or maybe one of my grandkids that first maybe can't afford college that I could help out with, and or a medical situation that you might have you could help with. There's so many different things just in the family that you want to know, hey, I can do this. If I need to fly out to see my daughter in Ohio, because they're having something that I just want to know I can hop on a plane and I don't have to think about, well, do I have enough in my account to be able to fly out? That's family motivates, and that also creates that why too. So I understand that. Yeah.
Money's good for the good it can do, and that's an attitude. I think the wealthier people are, the more you see that and the more generous they become. It's not just about them. It's about who else they can provide for. And obviously your daughters, I've got a daughter, and whatever that dad-daughter thing is, it was true with me. She's got me wrapped around her finger.
Oh, yes, same here.
Yeah, I get it. And it's just the way life is. And you want to provide for them, and that's awesome. So wealth can do a lot of things, and it's worth building. It's a fun journey. And I guess if I was going to share like one last thought for people, especially if they're thinking, I don't have time, I think people almost always overestimate what they can accomplish in a single year, and they almost always underestimate how much they can accomplish over 5 years. And even if you're in your 50s, 5 years, I mean, the older we get, 5 years seems like less and less time to me. I'm 48. So I'm like, okay, 5 years, that's not so long. I can handle that. But I've seen people go from zero to millionaires just by doing the right things, not having any particular amount of luck, but by doing the right things in that short a period of time. And I've seen people grow amazing companies. I mean, look what you've done in 3 years with your investment priorities. It's amazing if people will be willing to commit themselves to the long course. They might be underwhelmed with their initial results, but they're going to be overwhelmed with what happens over just a short few years. So it's never out of reach. You just got to get focused and get after it.
That's great advice. Well, I've kept you longer than I promised. I apologize for that, but I tell you, I could really sit here and talk to you for hours. Some really neat stuff, a lot of wisdom, learning a lot. Normally I have some other things that would precede this, but again, we ran a little bit over on our time here. But
Sure.
I wanted to ask first, if people want to find out more about the one thing, and you just talked about this podcast and the things associated with it, or just find out about things that you're doing. Is there some way that people could a place they could go to get that information?
Sure. They go to theonething.com with the number one. All of the stuff around the book is there. And on my or Gary's bio page, we link to all of the other books that we've written. So if people want to find out more, that's kind of the one place they can go and kind of explore it all.
Super. Well, great. Well, thank you. We have a tradition here at the Old Dogs REI Network that all of our guests, you already know what I'm saying.
You really make the introverts
even the introverts. Oh yeah, they're the ones that I have the most fun with. The guy that's like the accountant or something that's saying, what are you asking me to do? No, it always turns out really great. And there's also this little bonus I tell people too. We have our annual Golden Howl Awards. Okay, so like we take that we have all of our listeners evaluate and vote on the best howl, and we actually give out an actual trophy, for with a golden dog on it and everything. So there's motivation here to really just do your best old hound dog howl. Now you're in Texas. There's a lot of hound dogs around in Texas, and there's right, all these hunting dogs and everything.
But I've got a Brittany. He doesn't bark very much. Like I was gonna if I had to, I was gonna do Scooby Doo, but that's the baroo sound is not exactly a howl.
Hey, that's pretty good. No one's done that before. That could give you a little edge. Oh, Scooby Doo? Are you kidding? Yeah, I love Scooby Doo.
But I guess the closest I can come to a howl would be like my, I have to think of the Warren Zevon song, "Werewolves of London."
Yeah.
Werewolves of London. There you go.
Yeah, I love it. That was good. We got a little song in there too. Yeah, not too bad.
I don't think I can howl all by itself, right? So I could do that part of the song, which everybody does when it's playing loud enough.
Well, that's good. That is really good. Well, go ahead. You can howl, but you got to promise me you're at least going to do like the Scooby thing where he talks.
Oh, I can't. I can only do the Baruch thing. So that was it. So.
Oh, okay. Darn. Okay. All right. Well, do you want to go ahead and just do the howl one last time here, just to close us out?
So I have to do it multiple times.
Oh yeah, because you're an introvert. That's it.
Torture. Okay. Ow. And that's without the song.
Thanks, Jay. That was great. Classic, I'm telling you. But I'm really thinking. You got me thinking about the Scooby Doo thing. So no, it's okay. We'll do that next time. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on, Jay. And sorry we ran a little bit over there, but
hopefully it was helpful for your listeners. And if they have questions about something I said that didn't make sense or the numbers didn't add up, they can find me on social media, and I'll do the best I can.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate it. And also, I want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too, for joining us. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing right now, but the fact that you've taken the time to join us means a lot, and we greatly appreciate it. Please note everything that Jay talked about, including links to the book, so you guys could buy that if you want to, or you want to get the Audible version, or whatever it may be, will be on the website in our show notes section, which is at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. Well, that's the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king and real estate investing the means. Until next time, keep moving forward, and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.